Yeah, and I make the more in tune I am with myself, and the more I actually sit down and I evaluate myself, and I evaluate the things I do and I like and I don't like, honestly, you know, and kind of like removing the judge, the more that I find that I'm making conscious decisions that bring me consciously to where I want to be in life. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Instead of like unconsciously beating myself up or unconsciously like eating the cake or doing all these things that I seem as destructive. Like I'm living a more mindful life. So the more I go back in and I do this self inventory and I check in with myself from an honest place, the more I live a more mindful life. I'm aware of my decisions. I'm aware of how they affect the people around
And you're
me.
holding yourself more accountable. It sounds like
Yeah, yeah. Without
it's
beating
easy.
myself up.
So it's easier to hold yourself accountable if you're aware of your if you're aware of your habits or that relationship with yourself or that your internal dialogue. It's easier to hold yourself accountable than moving around in the world unconsciously and doing things just because you find pleasure in them. It's kind of hard to be rational because you're
Hmm.
just living in a reactive type of state of being.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I find that it's easier for me to be conscious and to really pay attention to what I'm doing when I'm not condemning myself for what I'm doing. You know what I mean? So I can be honest with myself because I'm not gonna beat myself up afterwards because I'm really
Mm,
just seeking understanding as to like, all right, why am I doing that? Why am
mm,
I really like I understand, man, like my obsession with cake and sweets is that's my comfort food. It actually
mm.
gives me mental stability. You know what I mean? Like I'll eat a cake and all of a sudden I'm smiling, bro. I can't eat cake without smiling. So there is a there is like this physical reaction that makes me happy, and I think we get caught up in that, but I'm aware of it, you know. And so when I'm consciously making these decisions, I'm also conscious of the fact that I don't have to like condemn myself and I don't have to abuse myself, you know, which is really where that when that critic gets loud.
Quick question: were you always this self-aware, or did it take
No.
practice, or how? What was the? If you could take us back last week, last month, last year, 10 years ago, how did this? How did this maturity look like to you? When did you decide to mature, or was it a decision you consciously made that life forced you to? You know, sometimes, we go through things and life forces us to change the way we're living. Like, we develop diabetes, we have a heart attack, or we have a stroke, or what was your impetus? What was your motivating factor to grow?
I think you know, it's funny, man, because I think intrinsically, instinctually, whatever, we all have it. It's all part of us. It's
Have
just
what? What do you
like
mean by it?
that almost like that thing inside of us that causes us to do self inventory, that self actualization, where you start to like hold yourself accountable for where you are in your life and where you are in the
Mm,
world. You know, I
mm,
remember reading a book that was like, you have to you have to understand what part you play in your own destruction, right?
mm.
Too easy to like blame someone else, and so then also understand what part you play in your successes. It's like because we tend to put it outside of us. So I've always had that in me, right? But
That
I,
ability to reflect. You mean that ability
yeah,
to
the ability to reflect like a conscious, you know what I mean? Like something was like, yo, Hob, man, that didn't feel right. Like I'm like, you know,
mm,
man, I walk away and I'm like, why that should have felt good, but it didn't feel good. Why did that happen? And
mm,
I think the difference was that as I became more and more in tune with my instincts and my gut, like listening
mm,
to my gut, I started to make ask more questions that led me to a deeper understanding of self, which led me to like reading books and taking these long walks where I would like process all this information and then
mm,
start to evaluate where I was, you know what I mean, in
mm,
terms to where I wanted to be in life, and in
mm,
terms to like
mm,
of what society told me I had to be in life, you
mm.
know, because I think that
Yeah,
that's where a lot of like the judgment came from. Society
yeah,
said I was supposed to, at this age, I should be here, there, with this and that. And then I was looking and I'm like, man, I'm not even close to any of that stuff. Am
So
I broken?
yeah, yeah. Did I cut you off right there? If I did, apologize. But you just
No, no, no.
inspired
Yeah,
my
go.
thing. So it sounds like there could have been conflict, within you or within us or within anybody who uses the outside world as a barometer of where they should be. Because
Hmm.
it's so easy, especially in this day and age. You can you jump on your phone and YouTube, IG, Facebook, turn on the TV, Netflix. You can really get hypnotized by the world outside of you and really start to say, damn, that person isn't as at this status at this age. Why am I not at this status at this age?
Hmm. Hmm.
So it could be a trap in the sense that um, it turns into a trap when you begin to judge yourself and beat yourself up. Not to say YouTube is bad or Facebook is bad. I don't think you're saying that. I don't think we're saying that. But it just came to the point of being conscious.
Of all of that, because that's where, like, there's a sense of self-worth, man. And we're domesticated to believe that, like, we got to either have fine clothing or this or that to equate to a status in life. You know what I
Mm.
mean? And for the most part, we're a
People,
very consumer society. You know what I mean? So people look at you and it's like, oh, I remember growing up, my man, kids would be like, rejaps, they cost $1.99.
recaps, they make you look fine. Recaps.
You know? And so, you know, people will be cruel, but you learn at an early age. It's like, yo, I better have a pair of Jordans, or I gotta have this dope rope chain, or I gotta have my diamonds because I gotta show you that I'm worth something. When you,
Yeah.
and then later on, you start, or I started to understand that that sense of value only mattered if it came from within. Because as long as I continue to let people on the outside give me my sense of value, I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I can't allow you to dictate my self-worth. It's called self-worth.
So, so you also made another comment in the beginning about COVID and the need to distance ourselves from each other and quarantine ourselves for the safety of the larger good, of course. But people have to look at themselves now,
Mm-hmm.
and I
That's
hear
why
you.
protesting, bro. I mean, for me, I know they want to get out and they want to pay their bills, but it's tough to sit home by yourself, man. Right? It's tough. Like, most people don't have a relationship with silence. Most
Mm,
most people can't sit down with their own thoughts, you know.
mm,
And thankfully for me, man, that's, years of meditation and of, like, being honest with myself. So my brain, my mind, or my ego has nothing to say that I haven't already accepted about myself, right?
mm,
And me and you've had this discussion. I feel like the ego can only attack you on things you believe, right?
mm.
So it's like when it attacks me and the ego's like, oh, you getting fat, bro. I'm like, yeah, I know. I chose to eat that cake. We cool. I know exactly how to work that off. You know what I mean? But unless
Yeah,
you come to a place, for me, if you're not okay with yourself, then being alone with yourself can be tragic.
hard. Could be hard. So that's a good point. I never gave thought to that. That aspect of society wanting to return to normalcy, and that normalcy is being social. And being social is important because we're social creatures. But I think you're alluding to something deeper in terms of going within and really, you know, having that relationship with yourself, whatever that relationship may be. And even from your own experience, you said in the beginning that relationship wasn't easy. It wasn't a gentle process. It was very. You called
Toxic.
it the. Say that again.
It was toxic.
Toxic. Yeah.
I mean, I realized in the process of work that I didn't love myself, and I wasn't aware of that, right? Or I was very hard on myself. So
So
everything I
what is love? I'm sorry, big bro. What is love? What did you said? Love yourself. What does love look like to you? What does loving yourself look like?
loving myself is opening myself up to everything that I am and not having to be just one thing. I'm a contradiction, and I love the contradictions about myself. I love
Mm,
that I'm unique, that I do things that other people don't do. Whereas before, you're trying to fit into this social norm. You're trying to, like, fit into this culture, and and you're told that you got to move like the Joneses, you know, whatever that is, and
Does
so
that game we played too? When you had to put this circle in a circle and a square in a square, and if you tried, you know, when you're young, you don't have the spatial intelligence to get it right the first time, so you try to put the triangle in the circle. It sounds like that metaphor came to mind when you were explaining, you know.
it's the same thing like Einstein said, right? If you try to judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll grow up thinking it's stupid. You know what I mean? It'll spend its
Mm,
whole life thinking they stupid. So
mm,
it's the same thing. If I try to like judge myself or love myself based on how somebody else looks, you know,
mm,
I'm like, yo, I'm not good looking because this dude got a sharp chin. I'm like, man, that's insane. That's
yeah.
insane. I'm not good looking because I don't because he got a six pack. Because you
Mm,
gotta have a six pack. Like you know, I just think that like we 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 wanna, or sometimes I would want to live into these unrealistic things.
mhm.
And just because at that point I wasn't there, so it's always like the grass is greener on the other side. But for me, loving myself was like appreciating being in my own skin, being present, you know what I mean? And knowing that I don't have to be anything else than what I am.
Accepting. That's what I heard when you said that. You accept yourself now. All of it, though. All of yourself or selves, however you want to
Yeah.
on that. But you seem more comfortable with your manhood and, you know,
Right.
and everything that comes with it. So another thing that jumped out at me, you're a director and you're an actor. You talked about how you collaborate with your partner, your business partner Gabe. But if you could tell us a little bit about, you know, what directing and acting means to you, how did you come into that realization that's who you wanted to be? Maybe some obstacles you had to overcome, and maybe finally some fruits of your, you know, your work, what has blossomed for you, you know, lately.
You know, it's funny. I mean, you've been a part of this whole journey, so you've actually seen it. So I'm always curious to what it looks like on the outside. But I had realized one time that I was like, when I would hear music, I would see images. And I didn't know why, but I would hear music and we'd be out riding and Woo would be on or Nas would be on or Big, and I'll be seeing images, you know, pictures in my head, right? And then as we move forward, those images started to become the foundation of my music videos. And it was like,
Mm,
oh, because I started to realize that I was seeing images that were associated with the lyrics, you know, or what the lyrics made me feel. So,
mm-hmm,
you know, they would be saying a rhyme, and in my head would be creating the visuals that related to what they were saying to me, even though the visuals weren't always the same as the words, but it was like another revelation, another way to reveal the same kind of information, you know? So they'd be
mm-hmm,
talking about, say, the crack game, and I would have visions of people in the hallways, you know, like in the project
mm-hmm,
hallways, or I have visions of people like cooking stuff up. So it was like tied into that. The images were associated with the lyrics I was hearing. Um, and I started to build off of that. It really, my life took a big shift when I realized that all the trauma, all the heartache that I had gone through in life were the stories that I was going to write. I realized
mm,
that those were the lessons that I was meant to teach. I had to go through that in order to give that perspective to the audience, because these are the stories I share now, you know. And so there's movies and there's things, there's these stories that you know, with all humility in the world, I'm the only one that could tell that story. Because when I
mm-hmm,
look at the people that I work with, I'm the only one that ever spent real time in a crack house. I'm the only one
mm-hmm,
that ever really lived into this world that people be writing about. So I'll watch a show, I'll watch something, I'll be like, that's not real. That's not how they move in the streets. That's not how we would do that. You know what I mean? Like, you got to do your research. But it was important for me because I used to be angry, and that's why I was like doing all these drugs and doing all this stuff, because that's a part of me, the judgment, the the hate for myself because I felt like I was poor, I was broke, or I didn't have a sense of value, led me to do
Mm.
drugs. You know what I mean? And self-sabotage. And then
Mm.
once I realized that, like, all that stuff that was causing my pain was actually the gifts that I was being given to then turn around and write these stories, right? Where I could tell somebody that their life has value without having to say, yo, your life has value. I could show
Mm.
it to them in images so that they come to that realization on their own. There's nothing more impactful, more powerful than when you have your own realization,
Mm.
right? So, huh?
Satori.
Yeah. That aha moment, Satori,
Oh,
exactly. That aha moment. You know what I mean? So as a director, it helps me. All these understandings help me. So when I'm working with actors, I never try to give them the answer. I don't. I try to ask them questions that will cause them to have that realization, to go through their own Satori. Because the moment they do, they become inspired to work more. They
they
become
own it.
inspired to
Own it.
live into it. Yeah, they
They
own it. They own it. And you'll see them, the excitement. It's like little kids. They're like, oh my, yo,
yeah,
how? Yo, oh my God. Yo, I discovered this. I'll be like, word? They're like, yo. And then this. And so I think I'm going to do this because that made me think of this. And that inspired me to do that. And it's like, you know, setting somebody free, man. Their imagination wakes up. You know what I mean? All of a sudden, they done broke that glass ceiling that stops them from like asking questions or exploring or going into unknown territory. You know, um, and so like that's what I find, like when actors love working with me because I'm like I create a space for them to be the best artists they can be, even better than what they imagined themselves being. You know what I
mm-hmm.
mean? Because I start to knock down the walls. I'm like, oh, you think that you can only play in this parameter? So what happens if I remove this wall and then ask you a question that automatically triggers you to step outside of that line, to go past that boundary?
Outside of your comfort zone.
That's it. That's it. Because the comfort zone is safe. I got it. I know
Yeah,
how everything functions in here,
yeah,
right? And then I'm
yeah,
like, okay, but what's out there? Because somewhere somebody told you not to go out there. Someone tells you like, oh, stay here, be safe. You know what I mean? And sometimes it's our parents or society. It's like, you know, you got to do this and you got to stay here because this is going to pay your bills and this is going to be safe. And so then you almost stop dreaming. You almost stop
yeah,
pushing yourself, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
so through all these self inventories and through me, like when I do a self inventory, I'll have a belief system, and I've had many, and I'm like, where did that come from? Is that really mine, or did
Yeah.
someone train me into that?
Yeah, that's a great point you make. In terms of belief systems, because we 9 times out of 10 we inherit them, you know,
Mhm.
in our youth from our family, from our friends, from our caregivers. And the fortunate people are the ones who had good caregivers, but the unfortunate ones that had caregivers that were malicious or critical, and they can adapt that. They will adapt that same self talk that the caregiver had. So now the caregiver doesn't even need to be there for them to stay within that box, or to yeah.
And that
So
becomes the critic, right? That's that voice.
voice, and it sounds like as a director you're a good caregiver because you're allowing them that freedom, and once they become habituated into that type of being or way of acting that you're explaining, they won't need you because like you'll forever be with them in regards to the lessons that you taught them and the lessons that they embody. Did that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, because that's the plan. You know what I mean? I've realized in all my spiritual work and all that self inventory that intrinsically I've always been an empowerer. I've always
Mm.
encouraged people. I've always been known to uplift. You know what I mean? I consider myself to be like a healer. You know, I have this ability to help people overcome. And if you ever see my stories, most of the stories I tell are about perseverance, are about overcoming obstacles, you know, because that's how I feel. That's what I had to do growing up. You know what I mean? It's the same thing. Like you couldn't afford an antenna, so you get creative and you end up with a wire hanger in the back of your TV, and now you got an antenna. You
Yeah,
overcome your circumstances.
Yeah, that's that hood shit in a
Yeah.
inventive, creative way. So tell us some more about your projects, your storytelling. You told us why you tell the stories that you tell because they're relatable to you and your experience. Maybe name some of your projects that you've done that you're proud of, or some that you're not too proud of. You know.
Well, I think I make what I realized was I went through all of that stuff because these were stories I was going to share. I believe that my stories are for like empowerment. I want kids to understand that the only limits is themselves. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? I want people to understand that they can do anything they want if they put in the right work. You know, there's really nothing that can stop us. So I started we started to create these stories like right now. I'm really proud of our last projects, and you can see the growth in my mindset and in the way I understand how to tell stories if you follow like my projects.
Mm-hmm.
So if you see Brothers Keeper, Brothers Keeper, which you saw has a strong sense of magic realism. There's a spark, there's a part like the play has to do with a lot of like spiritual stuff without us like trying to preach to you. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Or
Yeah.
like, you know, when you go to a lot of these Caribbean islands, everybody got a ghost story.
Mm.
Like spirit is a big part of us. You know what I mean? The that
Can you give
magic realism.
Can you give us a quick synopsis for those who don't know what a brother keeper is, what it entails? You know, something.
So Brothers Keeper is a story about two brothers, man, and one brother has a traumatic brain injury. And his older brother Tito is doing will do anything in his power to ensure his brother's safety. And when you meet him, you find out that Pachi, who's the younger brother with the traumatic brain injury, is is like dying. He's in danger, and Tito's trying to do everything in his power to save him. You know, he thinks that he has that burden on his shoulders that he has to keep his brother alive. That's the way this is supposed to play out. And sometimes things don't. They're much deeper than that. There's a
Yeah.
deep meaning in life. And what we found when we were exploring this piece was that part of Tito wanting to keep Pachi around was selfishness because Tito's sense of self-worth is tied into him taking care of his brother,
Mm.
being his
So
brother's keeper.
it was like a codependency there.
Yeah. Yeah. Because he's like, that's, you know, him taking care of his brother, making sure that he's safe is where he gets his value. You know, it's fine. So, you know, in order for him to like think that he deserves to live, he has to take care of his brother. And
Mm-hmm.
so we were attacking stuff like that. And you know, that was 2 years of exploration and playing, and now it's about to become a movie with Ellen Burstyn directing, which is
Mm.
huge, and because that was like one of my mentors, and to see like that is one of the ways I'll say like, yo, this is another way that I see the progression in my art, where now the people that were my mentors that I've looked up, I spent my life looking up to, are now becoming my colleagues
Mm.
where
Growth.
they want to create with me versus teaching me how to create. We're now creating together. If that
Who
makes
was
sense.
Ellen Burstyn? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to go back to that in a second. I'm just curious on who Ellen Burstyn is. And where did you meet her? Where did when did she become your mentor? And when did you become the mentee?
Well, it's funny. I have all these mentors who, you know, it's not the traditional sense of mentor. Like it was like, hey, you're gonna mentor me. It's just like we spent so much time, and I've learned so much from them that I've given them that title, and they've accepted it. You know. But I met Ellen when I started grad school in 2006, and then we've just been like kicking it ever since. And then I became a member of the Actors Studio, and she's like the president of the Actors Studio, and you know, all that history. And she's, you know, it's Ellen. She has an Oscar for she has an Oscar. She did you probably know her
Very
from
well.
The Exorcist or Requiem for a Dream. She's the old lady in Requiem for a Dream, and tons of other stuff.
Yeah,
But
very
yeah, I
cool.
don't know. It's weird. It's strange because I find myself these days that like I hang with a lot of older people,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because I love learning. So I just sit down and I'm like, just give me everything you got. Like,
Satori. Success.